Hi everyone, and welcome to the HALLO Compliance Network second virtual meetup. Today, we are thrilled to be here with you all again, despite our little adventures today with technology, thanks to Cloudflare. So our servers decided to give us a crash course in unpredictability, but I'm optimistic that this evening will be much more cooperative, given the fact that we have some star-studded speakers here. So tonight we dive into a topic as dynamic as it is crucial, sports integrity in the US. We're not just talking about the rules of the game here, we're delving into the very fabric that holds the sporting world together. And for this, we have such a great moderator, Anne-Marie Fursteger, who can already begin addressing his speakers, and I will see you later.
Thank you, Sultan, and a warm welcome to everybody who joins, also to our speakers of today, which are Jim Brown. He's head of sports integrity, Northern America, and athlete well-being globally at Sportradar. Martin Litzka, he's SVP, American Regulatory Affairs and Responsible Gambling at Entain. Jay Moore, he's co-founder and president of bettinghero.com. And last but certainly not least, Bill Beskrell III, PP3. He's partner at Princeton Public Affairs Group and a long-time advocate for reasonable regulation of iGaming and online sports betting in the US. When we speak about sports integrity, we tend to forget that it encompasses many aspects. It's not only about match fixing or insider information. It's also about bribery when it comes to tenders for big sports events. It's about doping. It's about also strategic play within larger competitions. But of course, we today focus on those topics that are directly linked to sports betting, i.e. insider information and match fixing. But we will also speak about athletes and why they breach the existing law, why they risk their career. We will also speak about education of sports people in the framework of sports integrity. And we will have a particular look at specificities in the US, just for instance, college sports and how culture may influence the search of problematic behavior, or whether it's less of a problem in the US than in other regions of the world. The US are quite a relatively new market when it comes to sports betting, has opened up 5 years ago. At the same time, the US regulated very quickly. Today, around 50% of all states already have an online sports betting regulation in place, and some kind of sports betting is present in approximately 80% of all states. And in this regard, I'd like to start with you, Bill. Hello. I hope your teeth don't hurt too much.
Yeah, the right side of my face is numb, but I'll do the best way I can to get through it.
Thank you so much for joining nonetheless so quickly.
My pleasure.
You've been around for a very long time when it comes to accompanying and also helping shape online gambling regulations. Now, when it comes to sports integrity, which is very specific and on the one hand, sometimes even a little bit neglected in laws, how did US regulators tackle the issue of sports integrity, and what were the countries they were looking at?
Yeah, Anna-Marie, thank you very much for having me. It's great to be here with Jim and Martin and Jay, all of whom are far younger and smarter than me. I think it's interesting to try to answer your question by telling a story about when we were able to get PASPA repealed and sports betting legalized. I remember a meeting that Senate President at the time, Steve Sweeney, who's just announced he's running for governor in New Jersey, 2 years away, and Governor Christie having a meeting with the NFL, who, as you know, were deadly opposed to legalizing sports betting. And boy, what a difference a few years makes. Because if anybody's all in, we know the NFL is all in. And Jim deals with that on a daily basis with all the leagues. Jim, good to see you. What I found reprehensible, and I can say this, some on our panel can't, but the hypocrisy of the NFL was so blatant, because after challenging us every step of the way for ultimately 8 years, they came to the table as we were authorizing the Enabling Act through the legislature a few days after May 14, 2018, when the Supreme Court ruled in our favor. They were asking for an integrity fee. Can you imagine? Just insane. Companies like Sport Radar, who provide incredible data and help the regulators and the operators with the integrity issue, because they really know in real time what's going on. And that sharing of data, that simultaneous data, is so critical to integrity. I also think, and forgive me for being so parochial, if you may, but the New Jersey DG, which really was the first state to launch after the repeal, got it right. And they work very well with the leagues. They met with the leagues immediately after the PASPA repeal. They probably had been meeting with them before that, but I know for a fact they were meeting after the repeal. And, the fact is that each of the professional leagues and the NCAA all have house rules, and they are modifying those rules every other day because this is an evolving process. Integrity isn't black and white. It changes. There's different things that happen. There's new technology. There's new information that gets provided. So what's great about this question you asked to kick off is it involves everyone on this panel, from the operator, Mr. Lichka's expertise, to the affiliates who bring customers in, and Jay Mao's expertise, to Jim Brown's company, who I've known very well and used to represent. Great company. It's critical to enabling the operators to do their job and the regulators to enforce and police the industry.
But when you said that the NFL wanted an integrity fee, how did they argue it? I mean, they also know that you don't need to question integrity if no one in the sports world would be open to fix. How did they argue that?
So the issue, Anna Marie, in America was after New Jersey put a ballot referendum on the November ballot that said, because under our Constitution, we had to amend the Constitution to allow for sports betting. Anything that's not already offered has to go to a ballot referendum to amend the Constitution. So we got 3/5 of each house to put it on a ballot in an exigent way. I ran the campaign, passed overwhelmingly, all shades of the demographic groups. Oh boy, I got to plug my computer in. Yeah, I'll do that in a minute when I pause. But what they were saying in their petition to stop us. So November 2011, we passed the ballot referendum. December, we get the Enabling Act passed overwhelmingly. I think it was almost unanimously by the legislature. January 12th of 2012, we were supposed to launch the first sports book outside of Vegas at the old Resorts Hotel, the first casino in New Jersey. And the NFL came in and shut us down. They got injunctive relief. The issue here is when they lost the case, they should have tried to settle the case back then. Because as you know, Dennis Drazen won a huge bond from the NFL for preventing him from accelerating and moving. As you know, the tracks are all allowed to do sports betting in New Jersey. They argued that, well, we have to provide data to the operators. So and they called it an integrity fee.
Okay. So it was more or less a fake term to get some money out.
Your words, not mine. I would call it the ultimate hypocrisy.
Okay. Understood, Martin. You have a very good comparison what is going on in Europe compared to the US. You've worked many years with European regulations, you are a lawyer, and you're now in the US. When you look back at how sports integrity is an issue in Europe, how would you assess the situation in the US compared to Europe?
Before I do that, let me thank Zoltan, the team, and you, Anne-Marie, for having me. Very kind invitation. And a few, perhaps, introductory points before I move on to discussing the serious topic that you have just alluded to. Clearly, even numbed, Bill, do send me the details of your dentist. You're even more eloquent than all of us combined. Impossible to beat that. Secondly, clearly also self-caution is advised because we got Mr. Rogacki, Mr. Golub here on the Zoom. Very good not to see you right now, but I can see that you're there. Always a pleasure. Mike knows a lot about sports integrity, far more than I do. And you guys might know, Bill will know what I'm talking about. It's an inside joke. Lou and I were exchanging comments on the philosophy of life in Tennessee a month ago. So that was great to see you. Great to see you here. And I suppose finally to add to Bill's NFL story, I had it at that time that another reason why that fee, because the leagues were really after a piece or part of play and piece of that particular cake, rumor had it that another reason to use the moniker of integrity fee was that under the then existing collective bargaining agreement with their players, the NFL and the other leagues had no obligation. Hopefully Roger Goodell's not listening, but then he's always hated the Patriots regardless, that they had no obligation to share that revenue with their players. So it would have been quite handy to have called it an integrity fee. On a serious note, it goes
May I just very quickly interrupt you? It came to my mind, in France, they simply called it sports right?
Yes, so they indeed call that a sports right in France. And to my knowledge, and if I remember correctly, France happens to be the only country that has actually sought to enforce that right. I believe Poland introduced a similar concept as well, but they have had much less luck with enforcing it. But in that vein, what I was going to say, and of course, Jay and Jim know even more and Bill about that than I do. Sports integrity is one of these cardinal issues that permeates all our efforts in our industry, because ultimately one, at least in my assessment, one of the key roles of this industry, as in the online gambling, or if you will, sports betting industry, is to help the likes of the leagues and other sports governing bodies, help them protect the integrity of the game. And not only for commercial reasons, because of course, if there were no sports, perhaps no esports, then we wouldn't have that much, if anything, to offer on the betting side of things. So that's where the cynical argument comes in. So by protecting the integrity of the game, we are indirectly or by implication protecting our own betting businesses. Of course, I'm brushing online casino side of the online gambling businesses aside. That's a completely different story, but integrity rules apply as well. So to finally come on to your question about comparison, I was going to say is that it's a concern that applies worldwide. We, in individual jurisdictions, we of course do need to reflect the applicable cultural idiosyncrasies, also the mix, the portfolio of betting markets we offer would be slightly different. It would probably be rather pointless to offer too many cricket markets up in Sweden or curling markets down in Italy. But the integrity concerns apply to all of those sports. That's why, and this is the perspective of an online gambling operator, Entain, just like all our competitors, is fair to say, has a dedicated sports integrity team. So folks trained in monitoring markets and identifying any, if you will, suspicious, fishy, untoward behavior. And part of their assignment, of their role, is they come across anything of that ilk to report it to the sports governing bodies, but also to our friends and colleagues. We may be at each other's throat on the commercial side of things, but for integrity and consumer protection purposes, we're all friends and colleagues. Advise the other operators that we may have detected something that deserves their attention as well. And of course, the likes of Sports Radar, that's where they come into, and affiliates, indeed, as Bill has pointed out, have a critical role to play. One final point was, besides the dedicated integrity teams, every single online or even retail sports betting operator has a trading team. So Entain happens to have a trading team of some 400 plus professionals. And those are not only the, if I may call them that way, guys and girls that set the odds. They're also experts in their sports. They know their sports inside out. So that's another, in Entain's case, 400 plus pairs of eyes that keep monitoring all their markets with having the ability to detect a behavior that needs to be addressed. So that, very long story short, sports integrity is absolutely critical to the long-term sustainability and success of betting businesses, and, if you will, for want of better expression, adjacent industries. And we take it extremely seriously, not only because it happens to be a legal or compliance obligation, not only because it's the right thing to do, but also, and I'll finish again on the commercial perspective, it preserves our business going forward.
So Martin, in principle, you say there's not so much a difference. It's only a difference in sports, but they need to be monitored and controlled pretty much in the same manner. And there is not more or less problematic behavior when you compare directly Europe and US.
Well, I'm sure we will, well, you've already mentioned that point, we'll come on to talk about college sports, which comes associated again. Jim's still in a far better position to discuss that point than I am. That has its specificities, but to briefly answer your point, I believe that it's such an imperative that there are sports-driven differences, but not necessarily, or next to non-existent differences continent to continent.
Okay, good to know. Jay, you founded your company back in 2018. You work with all big brands in the US, and you've developed a very interesting business model, which combines pretty much the offline world to the online world. Could you a little bit elaborate how you came to this conclusion to do exactly that, how it works, and if there is any direct correlation to sports integrity topics?
Yeah, absolutely. Firstly, I'll echo Martin and Bill's sentiment. Thank you, Zoltan and Anne-Marie, for pulling this together. And Jim, Martin, and Bill, pleasure to be on the panel with you. So yeah, we think about the industry a little differently than most affiliates. Traditionally, a digital only or digital first certainly approach, really taken from the European markets. Betting Hero is best known for being an omni-channel affiliate. And what that means is that we partner with operators to help them acquire, but more importantly, educate customers. And we do that mostly in person. And there's a few reasons as to why. The first and probably most obvious is that when my co-founder and I started the company, we did not have the prerequisite skills nor historical foresight to establish digital assets that were going to be competitive in the marketplace. We've since grown those and believe that we will be competitive from a digital affiliation standpoint moving forward. But what we did really understand very early on is that there was an enormous knowledge gap in the space. It's pretty easy to understand why. We have basically a brand new industry in a country of 300 or 400 million people. There's a lot of education to be done around what is sports betting, firstly, and then technically within the sports betting industry, how to successfully register and fund and actually use these products from a digital standpoint. The retail standpoint is quite easy to understand, albeit in many cases intimidating for customers that have never bet on sports before or never done so legally. But digitally, it's even more challenging. For example, when a customer is thinking about registering for a new account, they have to go through an enormous amount of hurdles to be successfully registered and being able to bet. First and foremost, they have to go through extensive KYC checks. They have to be able to successfully link funding methods. They have to be able to understand the odds in the markets that are available to them, all of which is expected to be done with very little education, essentially self-serve education. There's no resource that was available to help these customers. We built a business that bridged that gap. We convert customers from retail to online. So we're educating customers on the benefits of being able to bet with mobile devices if they're so inclined, but also on the tips and tricks, so to speak, to get through the convoluted registration processes that happen. I say all this because at our core at Betting Hero, we are an education company. We educate consumers on how to interact with sports betting products and sports betting in general, how to understand the odds, how to understand which payments will work and won't work, how to withdraw funds, how to take advantage of promotions that may be available so that the customer is enjoying the best experience. We say this in our mission statement, which is we help people enjoy their experience betting on mobile. So when you think about our mission statement of being able to help people enjoy their experience, as well as our ability to educate customers like no other company in the industry, including operators, as much as they do a great job, we have that interaction face-to-face with the sports bettor. And over the last 5 years or so, we've helped over 450,000 sports bettors go through these challenging steps and be able to then enjoy their experience betting on mobile. So when we think about the integrity aspect of the industry as a whole, we think about it very similarly to how we do with consumers. It's really important, in our opinion, in fact, critical, to educate those within the space about what can and cannot be done. You know, we all see a lot that is said and written and promised about responsible gambling, for example, from a consumer standpoint, which is critical and needed. What we don't see as much of is the education that's needed for the teams, the leagues, the college associations, the operators, as well as the service providers about the integrity of sport and the integrity of sports betting. We don't play an active role in educating the operators on integrity, or the regulators for that matter. However, we see a world in which we can harness the insights that we have from millions and millions of consumer conversations to be able to better provide resources for operators, as well as the leagues and teams who ultimately bear the responsibility for the integrity of their own sports, to be able to build resources and build tools that players, teams, leagues can take advantage of to make sure that we're governing the prohibited bettor just as we are the problem bettor. And that's where we intersect with the integrity of sports and sports betting. It's about education. How do we develop these tools so that those at risk who should not be betting on sports or fixing games, etc., do not have the ability to do so. And if you look at Europe, an extremely mature market or set of markets that are still wrestling with this problem, case in point, Tonali at Newcastle in England, and many other soccer players, for example, and that's my sport, so you'll have to forgive me for calling that out. I'm sure there are examples across other sports. But in soccer and football, there are countless instances of prohibited bettors still actively betting on the sports that they even play in, sometimes the games that they're playing in. Why is there not an industry standard resource available to the teams and leagues to require of their players and those other prohibited bettors to be able to immediately remove them from the top of the funnel and avoid the trickle-down effect, which is players being caught betting on their own sports or other sports or their own games, and then being banned, fined, and ultimately negatively impacting the sports teams and leagues. In the US, we're seeing instances of this happen already. For example, the University of Iowa has just gone through a pretty messy set of issues with players within the college who are betting on sports when they're prohibited to do so via proxy accounts, essentially family members. These are solvable issues, in our opinion. It's about educating, firstly.
This is indeed a big problem, and I'd say everywhere, because you cannot really ban the whole family from betting. And by the way, it's quite frequently, for instance, we know that most customers are male, and those who are women very often just bet on behalf of their husbands or whatever. So you cannot really ban the whole family. But what you said is right. Education is a key issue, and especially education of athletes in this regard. Yeah.
Yep.
So, but I think you are also very well suited to consider, possibly also, since you are this interface between off and online. It would be also interesting to do here additional education measures, perhaps sooner or later, but because I think the more also the consumers are aware of the risks, even if they cannot directly influence what athletes do, if they are aware, they also are more alert to possible betting markets that may be impacted. My personal view.
Yeah, I mean, just to add to that point, I mean, if you look at the college landscape specifically, which is unique to the United States and North America, I was a college athlete at a small school. Had sports betting been allowed when I was in college and playing, and imagine a world that betting markets were available on the games that I was playing in as a young, impressionable college student with little to no education done about sports betting and the integrity of the sports that being played in, especially for those that are not in scholarship positions within these colleges and these teams. There's a very real risk of prohibited betting. There's a very real risk that these students believe that they can fly under the radar and bet on games that they shouldn't be allowed to bet on. And in my opinion, it's a cause and effect, and it's a lack of education that is resulting in these instances. And in my opinion, that's why the leagues and teams and college associations specifically bear a large amount of responsibility in terms of controlling that and educating their participants or players and coaches and family members of those groups, but also roommates of the quarterback of a college program, because we need to remember that these are college kids. These are young people that can be influenced one way or another and see an opportunity and take advantage of it, which obviously can have massive detrimental effect. So again, in our opinion, it really comes back to education and creating the resources and guardrails around what can and cannot be done.
Yeah, we will still speak about this educational aspect, but first I'd like to ask Jim to present a little bit what Sportradar does. I mean, I'm aware Sportradar is one of the biggest data collectors when it comes to sports events. They have agreements with many associations, federations, leagues worldwide, and they use those data and analyze them and help prevent match fixing in concrete terms, but also help in the investigative process with, for instance, Europol and so on. Jim, could you shed a little bit even more light on what exactly Sportradar does and why it is so extremely helpful what they do?
Yes, for sure. Thank you, Henry, and thank you for the invite for joining. It's a pleasure to join Bill, Martin, and Jay on the panel. So yeah, I think a little bit about my background because it provides that unique lens that I view sports betting. So before joining Sportradar, I spent 7 or 8 years at the NCAA as the managing director of enterprise risk management, and under that umbrella was sports wagering and risk mitigation. So when Bill talks about passive being overturned in 2018, I had that view from the federation, from the governing body of collegiate athletics viewpoint, and really the focus was how could we ensure the competition integrity of all collegiate events, but also protect the student athlete well-being at the same time. So fast forward 2021, I transitioned to Sportradar, and proud to join Sportradar. Sportradar is recognized as the global leader in sports technology, specifically bet monitoring and integrity services. So we use advanced IT, AI, machine learning to monitor over 30 billion line movements annually across 600 operators. And what we were able to do is look for a divergence of our predictive line movement versus where it's actually moving from the operator to identify alerts. And what that is, it just sends out a red flag that additional observation and analysis needs to be done on that, where we use human intelligence and analysts at that point to review that. So it's through that lens that we talk about sports integrity, and really what is sports integrity, and why we love sport is because of the unpredictable outcome, right? The unknown outcome of an event, right? That's what makes it so entertaining. That's what gets fans engaged. That's why Martin loves the New England Patriots. It's not because it's a known outcome. It's because it's unknown, and that's why we love sports, especially in the U.S. So when we talk about sports integrity, it's how do we ensure from a betting perspective that it is not a predetermined outcome? How do we know? How do we ensure that matches are not manipulated, right? So what we do at Sportradar is use that advanced technology to do that. We're partnered with over 180 leagues across the world, over 40 in the U.S. So all the big names except the NFL. We're considered the official integrity partner for those. We monitor about 13,500 collegiate betting relevant events a year. So every collegiate sports betting relevant competition we monitor using our universal fraud detection system. So over the course of the last, since 2008, we've identified over 9,100 suspicious matches across the world. In 2022, we identified over 1,200 suspicious matches. 2023 is trending up slightly, but not much, about 1,200, 1,250 suspicious matches across the U.S. or across the globe. In the U.S., it's a relatively small number of all competitions that we see as being suspicious in the U.S., a handful. And really, what we see mostly in the U.S. is the sharing of non-public information, insider information. It is really what we see, especially in the collegiate space. We see that more than we see anything else in the U.S. And does it occur? Yes. We're not going to be foolish and say that it doesn't occur. It's just not as prevalent as what we see in the broader U.S. But picking up on what Jay and Martin and Bill said about the U.S. sports betting ecosystem, it's a little bit different in that there is such a range of sports that are wagered upon in the U.S. Right? You have the big four, so NFL, NBA, Major League Baseball, NHL, where that risk profile is completely different than the collegiate space. And when we talk about that risk profile, all four of those are participating in the sports betting value chain. And Bill can shed more light on how they do that and so forth. But that's that evolution from the integrity fee to where they are interacting from a commercial basis. Now, the collegiate space, not as much, right? There's one known deal from a from a commercial deal. There are two rumored deals, but it's not as prevalent. So think about that. But you also think about the athlete profile, where professional athletes, very well paid. They are usually, they have a buffer between them and fans or the broader society, high visibility of their sporting events. Collegiate athletics, well, for sure, you take March Madness, you take men's basketball, you take FBS college football, very high profile, very lots of visibility. But however, we consider those amateurs, and I'll say that for today, who knows what that's going to look like in the next couple years. But so they're not making millions of dollars off of their sport. They're still students, they are still interacting with their peer group, as Jay mentioned. Whether they are in class with them, they are in the dorms with them, they're in social settings with them. So they don't have that buffer between them and their peers, and they're a younger audience. So you think, in the international space, though, you still have lower tier type events like soccer or so forth. Some of those other lower tier sports is not very dissimilar from there. It's just the vast difference in the U.S. between the high profile Big Four and some of the collegiate events where we see betting on certain sports in the collegiate space that doesn't have a whole lot of visibility in the public, and athletes are not getting the multi-million NIL deals as well. So, we talk about competition, we talk about integrity, we talk about athlete well-being, which we can get on a little bit later, but it's that education, right? That is the proactive measures, educating our athletes, educating coaches, administrators, and game officials on what is betting integrity. And we could talk about what Jay mentioned on the prohibited entities in the U.S. It's a little bit different, and I think we have to distinguish the difference between a sports betting integrity issue versus a policy compliance issue, right? Some of these leagues, it's a policy compliance issue where they are not. It's not necessarily a sports betting integrity issue. You think about in the college space, what happens is college athletes and covered entities are prohibited from betting on any competition where the NCAA hosts a championship, whether that is amateur or professional. So a college athlete cannot bet on Premier League. Now, you think from a sports integrity aspect, is there a reason why? Or are there other areas of that? So that's where I think we need to make sure we're distinguishing between sports betting integrity issues and policy compliance issues.
But Jim, isn't only the difference that for that there exists a law, and for certain other aspects there doesn't really exist a law? Like, for instance, match fixing as such is not covered by criminal law. If a college student bets or isn't allowed to bet on a certain event where he's not even involved, then perhaps it's a problem because it's strangely regulated. But after all, it's all kind of sports integrity. No, you wouldn't agree?
Not necessarily. I think some of it is more of, it's not necessarily sports betting integrity. Is there a match fixing concern with a college athlete betting on Premier League?
I don't think so, no.
So that's where I think it's more of a policy concern.
Yeah, but sports integrity is many different aspects, and then what is regulated has a compliance issue, and those aspects who are not regulated, you have other issues. I mean, in this context, Martin, that is also such an issue. You have in criminal laws, match fixing as such is not reflected so far, right?
Yeah, I apologize, Amory. Is that for me or is that for Martin?
Martin? You are on mute. Hello?
I think Martin's trying to get it off mute.
Apologies.
Martin, can you hear us?
That's right. Yes. Yeah, apologies. I had a technical issue, not sure why, but I've managed to unmute. Apologies. Well,
no, Jim just said
my starting point when it
compliance
comes to
issue. If a college student should not bet on something where he's not even involved, and is not really a sports integrity issue. And I said, yeah, that's right, of course. But also, one can consider it part of sports integrity, only that match fixing, for instance, you do not have it reflected in the law as such. You have reflected fraud and bribery, but not necessarily match fixing as such.
Yeah, what I was going to say, and hopefully I'm not going off tangent. I will come back to your question very quickly. So if you bear with me, there's method to this madness. My starting point would be that most or shattering majority of college students, unless they happen to live in the likes of Kentucky, are underage when it comes to gambling, because most of them will be under the age of 21. So that's an absolute no-no, and no legitimate license operators would ever allow them to play on their site. So that rather restricts the scope of the potential issue. And I'm by no means, and Bill's in an even better position to comment on that, I'm not brushing aside by any means the risk associated with the still existent and in some states or some instances rampant black market. But for the sake of my argument, that's where I would start. College students, a shattering majority of them are underage, are not allowed to bet. Right. Linking it with education, and you both have touched upon that point already. You know, the ultimate sin is to bet on one's own game, one's own sport. Like, even if you happen to be a college student who is over the age of 21, and I'll come back to the other point about intercollegiate policies and NCAA policies, then just to put it bluntly, don't be stupid. Don't bet on your own game. Don't even bet on your own sport. Now, perhaps a bit more leeway when it comes to other sports, but yeah, I would agree with Jim's assessment. It's a matter of policy. And I would like to think that most colleges would do like to keep it clean, so they do not allow their students to bet at all. Perfect sense to me, because they're at the college to do other things. And once they're out of college and have turned 21, including those precocious kids that might be leaving college very early, then it's their choice whether they will bet or not. And that's the final point that I would make at this stage. That's where education plays an even more critical role. So everyone's choice, as long as they're doing it legally and responsibly, but they do, to Jay's points as well, they need to do it in a way that doesn't harm them, that doesn't harm their loved ones, but they may not know how to do that. That's why education is critically important. And I suppose to bring on a potentially controversial point, I think what we are yet to figure out, not only in the US, but also elsewhere, is at what point we start facilitating and providing that education. Because quite frankly, at college or at uni in Europe, it may already be too late. On the other hand, at least some, if not most parents, might find it quite controversial if their kid comes home and goes, oh, and let's say the kid, for the sake of the argument, is 15, 16. Oh, we talked about betting at school today. Ooh, why would that be? So that could potentially give rise to a flurry of complaints. But my personal view would be that at around that age, 15, 16, turn it into a mathematical problem or statistics issue. We may want to start ramping it up. Not educate, don't get me wrong, not educate kids about how to bet, how to gamble, but what it is, how it works, what are the risks associated with it. So that, long story short, I would suggest that it's multifarious. It's what we're talking about here. It's not as, we could simplify it to a sports integrity v compliance problem, but I believe there is much more to it. So as I've already said, I believe that not allowing college students to bet makes perfect sense, also because of, and that's the final point I promise, the issue that Jim has alluded to, i.e. the nil deals, names, image, and likeness. Yes, you would have your starting quarterback who, quite frankly, stands a far better chance of landing a $5 million a year deal with Nike than your third stringer wide receiver, but those guys happen to be in the same locker room. So doesn't that unfortunately incentivize that wide receiver to go and spill the beans about the fact that the quarterback might have limped at the latest practice? That's just, and I'm not accusing anybody of anything. That's just an example. That person may even happen to do it inadvertently, manage, or rather mention it to his partner. That person mentions it to another person, and at the end of the chain, unfortunately, there might be a dodgy street boogie.
But you all mentioned it's very crucial to educate, and I fully agree. And one can discuss about the age by when one does it. Here in Europe, there are so many programs in place and really well structured. Just like, for instance, in Austria, it's the Play Fair Code, where people travel to the different football clubs across the whole country and tell them about the risks related to agreeing to cooperate with criminal organizations, because in the end, it's about that. When we speak about match fixing, we have the EU Athletes Program, we have Transparency International. Bill, are there any programs in this regard in the US?
Anne-Marie, I'm glad, because I was kind of chomping at the bit for a couple of reasons. Number one, you have to give a lot of credit to organizations that Martin and I work with, like Epic Risk Management out of the UK. It's a global company. They just celebrated their 10-year anniversary. I was just over in Manchester to join in the celebration. And a lot of credit, and Jim talked about this quite a bit, a lot of credit goes to the NCAA, one of the first movers to really kind of get ahead of this. They saw this years ago. I know, for example, that the DGE, Lou Rigacki, has been in tons of conversations, not only with individual universities like Seton Hall, but also with the NCAA. This is a critical issue. Just like the repeal of PASPA, just like bringing online casino and poker to America, we are behind the times. But it's not the fault of anybody on this panel or the regulators. It's playing catch up. That's what we're doing. We've only had PASPA now for 5.5 years. So we're going to celebrate our 6-year anniversary next May, June. Okay. Epic Risk Management has a wonderful, they're not the only organization. There's Mindway, there's all types of different organizations. Charles Oakley and Bo Gray, who Martin and I also work with, have another educational process. Give Better, My Wager Score. There's technology, there's Gamban. The bottom line here isn't to sell a particular vertical, but it's to give credit to an organization that is ahead of the curve, meaning the NCAA. There's no other organization in the world similar to the NCAA who has to deal with the issues like this one. It's going to sound very pedestrian and simple, but in every state in America, you can bet on horses at the age of 18. But in every state in America, with few exceptions, you can't bet on sport or gamble, poker, casino till you're 21. Welcome, Kentucky, where it's 18. And that provides additional stress and strain on the universities that are located in Kentucky. Mm-hmm. But I want to tell you this story because I think the best way to bring a point home is to tell a story. When I grew up in Paterson, New Jersey, in an Italian-American household, every Sunday we had Sunday sauce, some people call it gravy, meatballs, sausage, braciole, pasta, red sauce. Parmesan cheese, tomatoes, and then pinoli cookies when we were done. I tell you that story because when I was 12, 13, 14, and my brothers were, 10, 11, 12, a few years behind me, my dad poured us every Sunday. My dad's a pretty responsible individual. He's also a politician, a member of Congress, so I got to be careful here, but he poured us a small glass of wine. Not because he was pushing alcohol on us, but because, back home in the Italian culture, there is no age restriction on that. It's sort of a part of the Italian culture. Why is that important? Those do-gooders, right-minded people who think they're, the paved way to hell is paved with good intentions. It is ridiculous for anyone to suggest that we shouldn't be educating our children. We do it for sex education. We do it for drugs and alcohol. We need to do it for gambling. So we're sensitizing them. What do we wait till the clock turns 21 and then pound them? They're already going to be gambling. They're doing it right now. Whether they're 16, 17, or 18, we have a responsibility, so do parents, but the industry, to get ahead of that curve and to educate those students so they don't fall down the 1-2% rat hole of gambling addiction.
That's extremely interesting what you say here, that there is also not necessarily an education on other so-called sin products. Why do you think one keeps away from youngsters those issues which are simply part of life? Is this something, and how could it be addressed? Because from everything you said today, I take it right now, match fixing in the US is still not a big issue. They are particularly for sports, they are well paid, you have a different sports system. But when it comes to betting and when it comes to side aspects, there is definitely not enough education there. So how, and it's with the cultural background in mind, how can that be changed? To make sure that in 10, 15 years, not all of a sudden one is confronted with a huge topic. Jay, perhaps you want to answer? And then perhaps still the others follow. We have around still 5 minutes, 10 minutes left.
Yeah, I'll try and go quickly, and I'm curious to hear what the other guys have to say. For me, this is where the really difficult topic becomes in focus, which is, in my opinion, and someone mentioned it earlier, which is the transfer of non-public information. Because, look, I think there's a stigma around gambling, and rightly so. I think that we have to frame the United States and North America in general and look at the consumer set within this marketplace. You compare it to Europe, we're dealing with toddlers in the US. The most experienced gambler in the North American market, online sports betting gambler, is 5 years old, right? In terms of their experience set legally. Many have gambled offshore and done so from a retail standpoint, but digitally via a mobile device or online, we're dealing with relative toddlers in terms of their experience set. So I think we should first frame our education with that in mind, that we need to start from the basics. And in my opinion, one of the reasons that maybe the industry has missed a bit of that over the last 5 or 6 years is because a lot of this industry has been built on the back of established mature markets that come from Europe, where gamblers are innately much more educated on how to gamble responsibly, but also those that are within the competitions that are being gambled on have also been around gambling for a long time. They have been brought up in such a way that that innate education or knowledge on the do's and don'ts are set in place. In the United States, we're starting from ground zero. And in my opinion, we're probably 5 years now behind in what could have been done. I think that's why over the last couple of years, one of the reasons why you've seen such an aversion from operators to promote or even be associated with colleges in particular, because that is the first entry point. That's the gateway, if you like, to the experience that these folks are going to have gambling. So in my opinion, there needs to be some sort of educational program in place for the general population that is to do with, one, integrity of sport, but also responsible gambling. And there are several groups that do a fantastic job of promoting responsible gambling, as well as the operators, which is critical. But I do think that there needs to be some sort of national campaign that could be done via multiple mediums that is not geared towards encouraging gambling, but geared towards the educational component of what you can and cannot do and what you should be aware of when receiving non-public information. I go back to that non-public information piece because that is where there's the most gray area. Most people understand, even if they're a college athlete, I shouldn't be betting on the games that I'm in. I shouldn't be betting on the sports that I play in. I shouldn't be asking my mom to create an account so I can bet via her phone, which happens, by the way. What isn't covered often is if you receive certain pieces of information that are non-public, what can you then do and not do? I don't think there's a silver bullet answer here. However, I think we need to learn from what we're seeing in more mature markets like in the UK to understand the risks that are there, and then also layer in an additional level of assurance, which is that in the UK, we don't have university gambling, right? You can't bet on Loughborough's football team, for example, at least that I'm aware of. But in the US, I believe there are markets, or there will be markets, where you might be able to bet on college swimming and diving, for example. Not a mainstream sport, not one that there is likely to be much NIL influence, but these students go to class, and if somebody sees a brace on their leg, or somebody mentions that, I pulled my hamstring, but I'm going to play, these are pieces of information that can be used to someone's advantage. So I think there needs to be a nationwide campaign that is thoughtfully laid out in such a way that it presents the risks associated with gambling in the future.
Honestly, I think you four would be well suited to found a working group and to develop a tailor-made educational program for the US, because what I found super interesting, Jay, you are totally right. In Europe, you have so much more mature markets. So the starting point is completely different. And considering all those specificities in regard to sports, in college and so on, you have a completely different situation. You have simply a very different culture also. In Europe, it's certainly not as much taboo as it is in the US. And one would probably need not only specific education of active athletes, but of the general public. And in this regard, I think we have found a very good starting point for all of you to work on. I thank you so much for joining me today in this panel, and it was a great pleasure to talk to you. I learned a lot today, and I hope our audience as well. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Anne-Marie.
Zoltan?
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.
Everyone.
Thanks, Zoltan.
All right.
Thank you.
Tim,
Bye-bye.
Jay, Martin, take care. Merry Christmas.
Bye-bye.
Happy Thanksgiving, everybody.
All right. So thank you so much, guys. And as we conclude our final meetup of the year, I'm filled with gratitude, guys. This year has been extraordinary. We hosted 4 in-person conferences, 14 virtual meetups, and released over 50 podcast episodes. And we reached over 5 million readers all across our platforms. This has been a great journey this year, and we are very excited about next year. And we thank you a lot for joining us, subscribing, and being so coming back every time, watching our episodes. So wishing you all happy holidays, and see you next year, everyone.
Happy holidays.
Happy holidays.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.